I'm McKinney Smith. In 2009, while going through a divorce, I decided to jump straight into entrepreneurship. In 2012, I lost my sister and asked myself, what legacy do I want to leave behind? Since then, I've become a serial entrepreneur, helping other women publish their books, produce their podcasts, and reach their big goals to walk in their greatness. I realized the importance of sharing our stories of resilience and how it can be another's guide to walk in a manner worthy of their calling. We are blessed to be a blessing, so get ready to be blessed with an inspiring testimony. Hey, Legacy Leavers, thank you for joining us in the Walk in My Stilettos podcast, the top 1.5% most popular show globally, where we have conversations with extraordinary women that are letting us step into their shoes. I help women to own their voice, to create impact, prosperity, and legacy. I get inspired when I see another woman succeeding, but what interests me more is her backstory and her mindset on how she got there. So since you're already here, you may as well subscribe. Today, we have Sunnie McFadden-Curtis. She is an award-winning filmmaker and social advocate for women and children. Sunnie began production of Broken Vows, Stories of Separation in 2016 following her own separation. And through hundreds of hours of researching and interviewing, she understood the unique challenges that families encounter. Broken Vows takes you into the lives of several women to learn more about the process of navigating a separation. The film follows the socially conscious producer's previous projects, Bullying, A Culture of Silence, Cyberbullying, Where Are We Going Wrong? And Shane, Are You There? So please welcome to the show, Sunnie McFadden-Curtis.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story and all your gems with us.
I was happy to.
So, as an icebreaker question, I love to start the show just to get a bit of an idea of where you were before you got to where you are presently. So, as children, we have these vivid imaginations of what we want to be when we grow up or what we want to do before society tries to limit us and box us in and tell us to be realistic, before the outside world starts to kind of taint our beliefs about what is possible. So one, I would love to know what you wanted to be as a little girl. And two, I would love to know what you were like as a teenager.
Okay, very good icebreaker. Well, let me just start by saying that I was raised in a suburb of Toronto. And from a very young age, I had a real interest in the creative, in teaching. And at a young age also, I was made to be aware of socially conscious issues. And that stayed with me to present in terms of how can I marry all of these things together to do what it is I do today. But again, back then, having said what I said, I really wanted to be an actor from a very young age and a mother. Those two things really stayed with me and were things that I really wanted in my life more than anything. And that kept coming back to the forefront of my mind. But as a teenager, I was inquisitive. I was raised in a family that was very protective. So I would get my toe wet and then, come back and then get my foot wet and come back. And I would say that I was very inquisitive. Again, still had a love for the art, but I didn't venture too far. Let's just say that.
Okay. So when you were younger, you wanted to get into acting and be a mom, which you've been able to do both, correct?
Mm-hmm. I have, yes.
So I love hearing when we had, I'm going to say, none of those blockages about, our fantasies and our imagination, and then we're able to actually live those things. Sometimes people end up becoming absolutely nothing related to what they wanted to be as a child. So I would love if you could share your journey of how you got into being a filmmaker and I guess into the advocacy work as well.
Okay. Well, ironically enough, they kind of go hand in hand. And I was an actor at the time in front of the camera. And my family experienced an unfortunate situation. And one of my children was bullied. And it went on for some time and ended with no resolution. And I was not happy with that, left with a broken child, and really wanted to try to turn it around for my child to reinstill the faith in the system. And so what I did was, ironically enough, I walked into a camera store and for other reasons. And I went up to the counter where all the cameras were. And I looked up at the wall, looking at all the cameras. And all of a sudden I had an epiphany. And the epiphany was, I'm going to make a documentary on bullying. And I'm going to try and help my son through this process. And why not try to help others as well? So I didn't buy a camera that day. I went home. I sat my son down. And this was probably a month after we'd left the school. And I asked him, how would he feel about producing a documentary on bullying? And it would help him and it would help others. Now, mind you, I did get a little bit of advice from his doctor and asked if this would be something okay to propose to him. Mm-hmm. And so I said, take as long as you want and come back to me when you feel like you've decided. 3 days later, he came back and said, okay, let's do it. And remember, I was in front of the camera. The only experience I had in filmmaking was just being on set and seeing what was happening around me. And so I really had no idea how to do this, but I've now started something. I've opened a can of worms, and now I have to step through it and make something happen. So anyway, he agreed, and I went to Apple and signed up for classes on how to edit. And I stayed 2 steps ahead of the process that I was doing. And so we started the interview process. We started with actually a friend of his that had been bullied. He did the first interview, and moving along, he became busy. I had promised him that I would complete this documentary. So I took it and ran, and it took me 3 years to complete. It's in presently 47 cities across North America, predominantly libraries. I then started speaking internationally on the subject matter. And then my son and I were invited to the Senate and for a roundtable discussion on cyberbullying and bullying and how we could help make schools safer. And it wasn't just us, it was a multitude of people from different states, countries, and backgrounds. And so that was quite an experience for him and I. And then I took that and I, with 2 anti-bullying coalitions, approached Elizabeth Whitmar, MPP, and we proposed that there be a resolution passed. And the resolution was passed not too long after we had met with her. And that brought to life Bullying Awareness Week in Ontario. The 3rd week of November is allocated to schools educating around bullying in their schools. And I look at that as a week into the rest of the year in terms of continuous education around bullying. So that's really where my filmmaking career came. And that was where I found a way to marry all those things way back when that I wanted to. And that was to fill voids, help educate, even though I didn't know that at the time, fill voids, educate, and help those who might be vulnerable in particular situations.
Wow. So, I mean, first, I'm sorry that your son even had to go through the experience of being bullied. One thing I always say on the show is that your pain births your purpose. You know, oftentimes it's things that we need a solution to that make us passionate about helping others with the same thing. And in doing so, like you being able to implement so many things, well, I mean, the awareness of it, one, with the film, but two, having it in libraries all over, being able to push forward and let that go into legislation, and having, anti-bullying awareness day within the schools. It's such a beautiful, beautiful, I'm going to say, outcome from pain. Being able to transmute that pain into something positive. It's a beautiful example of that. And
thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure you hear it all the time, but thank you for the work that you do and for the passion that you have behind it, because some parents, as much as they don't want their kids to be bullied, it's just about just protecting their own child. But you've gone a step ahead and said, it's not just about my own child. It's not just about my own community, but the world at large. How can we provide a solution? How can we, help others? And this is part of why I love doing this show, because women like yourself that are leaving a legacy, and I do hope that you know this, but the impact of that legacy, the depth of that legacy, how it affects so many people is such a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I mean, even what I also heard in your story, when you said that you went to Apple and learned how to edit, and you just stayed 2 steps ahead of the process. I think oftentimes as people, I don't want to say just as women, but as people, we count ourselves out of doing something. We say we can't do something because we don't know how, or, we don't even know where to begin.
100%.
And the example of you just staying 2 steps ahead, you don't need to know all the steps. You don't need to know the end process. It's just taking action and being even 1 step ahead of where you need to be. Such a beautiful example.
Well, thank you. And you're right, because if you sometimes look at the bigger picture, it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And it can create paralysis within one person.
Yes.
So I think it's good to stay 1 or 2 steps ahead and see where that journey may take you, but persevere.
Yes, absolutely. That whole story in itself just speaks to your resilience. But I guess, why did you choose to produce Broken Vows, Stories of Separation?
Well, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't because I went through separation initially. It was because I kept meeting an influx of women who were sequestered in the court system for way too long, or were in a paralysis state, as I mentioned earlier, not knowing what was lurking around the corner for them, trying to keep a roof over their head, so on and so forth. And being an advocate for women and children, would ask me questions that I couldn't answer, but wanted to for them. So I kind of went out on a journey, and I approached a judge and lawyers, etc., trying to get the answers to these questions that were being asked of me repeatedly. And then I realized once again that there's a void in the system for this information, and that there was a bigger story here than what I initially set out for. And so that's where Broken Vows grew from. And then subsequently, during that whole time and process, I then also went through a separation myself.
Mm. And so I watched the trailer, and there's a mix of women who have been, I guess, married for, different lengths of time, from, 15 years to 25 years to 4 years. And I'm sure that you found a commonality in their separation stories somehow.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I in my pre-interviews, when first of all, when I'm looking for subjects, I put the word out there, and it happens organically.
Mm-hmm.
Then when people start coming to me, I do pre-interviews. And in those pre-interviews, I find out, how much they're willing to share, what their stories are about. And then I want to have different stories that can be even far reaching out there that people can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So the one commonality that they do have is separation, but their stories are all very different and very unique. And I even have one that's an amicable separation, because I want to show that, in fact, it can be done, although you are not unscathed by the heartbreak, it can be done.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. I mean, my parents were separated for 18 years before they actually got their divorce. My separation was, I believe it, I'm like trying to recall. It was such a traumatic scenario, but I believe, well, it was definitely over a year before the divorce was finalized. But I know women that I met them at the beginning of my separation, and that was back in 2008. And they just got their divorce like this year, 2022.
I'm not surprised. Everybody gets there in their own timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can be, actually more often than not, so psychologically exhausting that one can't, dig deep and find that strength to go into perhaps another fight or situation. They get there on their own timeline.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
all different beings.
Yeah, everyone's healing process is different. Everyone's journey is different.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you about the timeline of things, whether it's grief, whether it's separation, whether it's, whatever it is.
Financial, any number of things.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone's story can differ. So why did you choose separation as opposed to divorce?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Separation is that gray area that so often is really never spoken about. And more often than not, people think, oh, you're separated, you were in an unhappy situation, you must be happy now. Well, that isn't always the case. It is the most difficult process in the whole journey. And, first of all, the pain of separating. Sometimes you might have been in an abusive relationship, and if not handled appropriately, the children suffer, and in some cases for a lifetime. And I wanted to highlight that time that really wasn't highlighted or spoken about, and to show the diversity in what one might go through in this time frame. And you going through it can probably contest that it's a very difficult time that no one really speaks about. And sometimes, as a woman, because my documentary really focuses more around women, will speak about it or before they separate. And in some cases, their friends don't want to hear about it till, they've made a decision. So that will have the woman sort of retreat and go through it alone and not share. And I wanted to highlight that as friends and family, we have to be there for them during this time. Even if they're not saying anything to you, we need to reach out and say, are you okay? They may not be ready to share, or they may need you to ask a few times. And so I also interviewed family members, friends, to show how they were there for their family members and the support that they gave, which again, if I focus on divorce, we wouldn't hear or see any of that.
Right.
So I really did want to highlight the gray area that really wasn't spoken about enough, or in some cases at all.
Right. And I think that it's really important to, I guess, focus on the separation part of it, because I'm sure there's tons of stats on divorce. There's tons of stats that show whatever you Google on divorce. But when it comes to separation, like you said, it's not as talked about, the process in between, how ugly things can get, or how, there are situations where, like you said, they're amicable. It's not so bad, but the process where you are in that time, you're grieving something. You're grieving the loss of a relationship. You could be grieving the loss of extended family or friends that you guys shared. There's so many things emotionally that someone is dealing with during that separation time. I know for myself, financially, I took a huge, huge hit during that time, because for the 4.5 to 5 years prior to filing for my divorce, I was a stay-at-home mom, and my partner made multiple six figures. So we had properties, cars, all, children, all these things. But during that time, now I had to be able to stand alone, be a single mom, provide for my kids. In that process of even thinking about filing for the divorce, just the separation alone trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for this mortgage? How am I going to make these car payments? How am I going to feed my children? Like, how am I going to be in all of these places I need to be at once? How am I going to stay sane?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if the conversation around that was more open, or maybe it just wasn't open to me at the time, I feel like it would have been a lot less difficult. I can count on one hand the community, the close community that I allowed in to help me, because during that time, it comes with shame, it comes with guilt, it comes with all kinds of feelings where we don't want to share what we're going through or talk about the situation for many different reasons. But I'm grateful for the people that were there for me. I'm grateful for the friends that rallied around me to make sure that I did eat, or to make sure that my kids were, supported, and that I got a second to myself for self-care. I think those conversations are so important.
100%. And so then you would agree that it can be the most psychologically exhausting time, which is why I say, offer to take the kids for a couple hours overnight, whatever you can do for the woman who's separating. Drop off a couple of meals. But again, if the woman isn't ready to speak, keep pursuing, keep trying until she is ready, because I guarantee you, she needs your support. She just has to get there in her own time to be able to share and tell you. And when you are separating, as the woman who's separating, be specific in your needs. And always be specific in your needs. If you need someone to just listen to you, then you express that. If you need advice, well, then you express that. What your needs are, be specific in how you get that across.
Yes. I found in the beginning of my separation, I didn't know what my needs were. It was almost like I had spent, having two relationships back to back that both lasted almost 9 years. So I had spent almost 18 years caring for someone else's needs on top of the children. So I didn't know what I needed, and grateful that I had friends that just showed up continuously with things until I was able to communicate what I needed, because I didn't know if I just needed a hug. I didn't know but when they gave it to me, I was so grateful for it.
Exactly, right? 100%.
So I know that you also produced a companion to the film to provide resources.
I did.
Okay.
And
hear all about that so we can know how they can get further support as well.
Yeah, I'd love to share that. Again, going to your point when you said, I didn't know what I need. I didn't know how I was going to do this and this and this and this. Well, I went through that, and so many other women go through that. They don't have the answers to multiple questions they have. So the plan for me all along was, I knew I was going to have an overabundance amount of footage that I did not want to end up on the editing floor. I did not want to waste this useful information. So the plan was to make a companion digital resource to go along with Broken Vows, which I call Broken Vows the Resource. So it's 6 parts, and it, anything from legal questions to wellness for women upon separation, even before, and her children. You want to go back to school, dating after separation. I have a sex therapist in there. I have a cosmetic surgeon in there. I have, how do you, deal with the mortgage? I have an accountant. And in total, this answers over 350 questions.
Wow.
And, I am just finalizing certain things with it. But, those resources, or if you have questions, if your audience has questions about it, can, find out more information on my website or reach out to me. But, in that time, it's all enough in itself to take care of you and your children, never mind all these other things that you're trying to take care of at the same time. And, in that time, you're also, in some cases, dealing with making life-altering decisions, i.e. the children, the house, etc., in this state of mind. And I thought, if I can alleviate some of that stress so that the women can be there for themselves and be there for their children. And remember, speaking from experience, so I know how it feels. Not everybody's pain, but I have some idea.
Yeah.
then I'm going to try to do that with this resource.
I love that. And I'm sure, especially during the pandemic when people were, being isolated with their partners, and lots of people were going through separation during the pandemic.
I mean, can you imagine?
Like
Oh,
the stories I was hearing, couples that I thought were doing great separated during the pandemic. It was almost like people were forced to spend more time with their partner and realize, I don't know if this is the person that I can tolerate for the rest of my life. And I'm sure people constantly share their stories of separation with you, no?
oh yes.
So
Yeah.
I guess throughout the pandemic, how did that, change or affect the work that you do?
Well, again, uh, during the pandemic was the go time for me in terms of editing this and completing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I really put my nose to the ground and just grinded it out. And mind you, that there was the pandemic, the race riots, and a multitude of other things. But I knew that I had to get this out there because in some cases, women were sequestered in the household with their abusive partners, and they had children. And though the percentage of abuse during that time, in the case of women, went up substantially.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, I just had to toe the line and work my butt off to try and finish this to get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of it was done, but yet, yes, I still had people speaking to me, but it didn't really affect my work because I was already in the process of completing it.
Okay. So what advice would you give to a woman listening right now that is going through a separation?
First and foremost, I would reach out to your doctor, and I hope that you do have a doctor. And if you don't, I would get one to find out how best you can take care of yourself during this time. Because in a lot of cases, we have children, and how can we be there for our children? Secondly, I would get, and no particular order, but I would get either a good therapist or a good counselor for both you and your children. Because if you don't have family or friends, and even if you do, you need that outlet. How do I, to be able to say things out loud and get the advice you need, and then them to be there for your children so that the children can speak to somebody outside of your family and feel comfortable enough to do so. I would also caution somebody to get a really good family law lawyer and somebody who focuses in family law, not outside family law. And, sometimes we get advice from lawyers that are outside that realm. And, it's a realm all in of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's best to get the advice from somebody who specializes in family law. Now, there are lawyers out there who will help women who may not have the financial means. And also, you can get a half an hour with a lawyer to ask questions. So there are ways around it, and we must be resourceful. And again, some of this information can be found in my resource under legal in that particular part of the resource. But we must be as resourceful as possible, especially if we have children, and we must dig deep. But one thing I can almost guarantee is that you can make it through the darkness to the light. You can. And
Yes.
it may not seem like it when you're in the thick of the storm, but you can.
Yeah.
And there is brightness on the other side for you. But you must reach out for it. You must walk towards it.
Absolutely. I love that advice, and I totally agree with you. It can't rain forever.
Right?
With with hearing all of the stories of separation, and I know the emotional roller coaster that may come with, like, how do you stay motivated?
Well, we all have our moments and times and days where we just need to retreat and just step back from things. And when I feel that way, if I'm not having a deadline crunch, then I do that. And for me, it's my deck
Mm-hmm.
and my music And if I need to dance on my deck by myself because nobody can see me, I'm going to dance on my deck. I'm going to let it out. I'm going to just reflect in and reach inside me for the answers that I need to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
But having some downtime, and I know it isn't always easy, and I know it isn't always possible, but even if it's an hour, and speaking to this project, I have these women relying on me to share their stories. And those stories were going to help other people. How could that not motivate me? How could that not?
Mm-hmm. I can totally relate. I can totally relate.
I can totally relate, exactly. But
I had
we all have our moments.
absolutely.
And but it's when we're in those moments, we have to shake our heads and go, okay, I've taken a day, I've taken, 2 days, I got to get back to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm relying on me, my children are relying on me, life is relying on me. I've got to get back to it. You must dig really deep, which I've done many a times over my lifespan.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things. So you spoke to, dancing on your deck, and that just made me think of, a lot of the things that I've studied about how the mind works and stuff. So it's energy in motion. Emotion is energy in motion. And you being able to just move and move freely, it's a form of therapy. I can't remember where I heard it, but there's a quote that says healthy motion equals healthy emotion.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like a form of therapy. But also when you spoke to being able to tell other people's stories and having other women rely on you, I think it's important for the women who are listening. Like sometimes we ask ourselves, like, what is our why? What does keep us motivated? And when we are only looking within ourselves, and whether that be, I don't know, whether that be our coping mechanism or ego or what have you, sometimes it prevents you from walking in your greatness. It prevents you from leaving a legacy and making the impact that you want to make. But you said it's not just about you. And I think, what we both have in common is when you're sharing someone else's story and you're sharing a delicate story, something that is truly emotional, it's important that you handle that with care. But also on the flip side of that, where you said that it helps others. So knowing that you are helping other people to heal, knowing that you're preventing other people from having to go through, the struggles that they may go through if they didn't have the tools or the guidance or the inspiration or the stories, knowing that you are making a difference in someone's life in whatever capacity is huge motivation. And I know for myself, when I get the messages or DMs or reviews of what the sharing of the stories has done for someone, whether it inspired them to go on and get therapy, or whether it inspired them to now be able to be open to a new relationship, or it inspired them to start their own brand or their own business, like those things warm my heart and motivate me to keep going. So I would love to know, like, what inspires you the most about what you do?
Well, let me go back a step. And speaking to the women and their stories that I shared, and, subsequently helping their children as a result, and the women, a big driving force for me are my children. My children are a huge driving force for me. And when I went through difficult times, and I did through the process of making this film, I mean, I went through a separation partway through. I lost a child partway through,
Wow.
a multiple of things. But I wanted to show my children that no matter what you're faced with, you can reach your goal, you can get to where you were going, you can do that. I wanted to show that to my children. It was very important.
Mm-hmm.
And when I lost my son, and I have had 3 children, I still have 3 children, but anyway, I took 5 months off. And then I just dug really deep and got back at it. And again, remembering that I have to represent and show my children, that you can be faced with adversities and challenges and obstacles, but you can step over them, around them. And I did that. And they were a huge driving force for me. And then again, of course, the women and the children of the women and the children of the women that were going to see this. And, when I do the work, I don't think, oh my God, this is going to be, this and this and this. I just do it. But to continue to do it, I think of those things. Not, the awards that I'll get or this or that. I never think of that. I think of who and how I can help these women and their children.
My condolences for the loss of your son. Can't even imagine. But you sharing that also speaks to, like I said before, your resilience. You honored your feelings. You took some time that you needed, the self-care, and then you came back and did the work.
May I clarify something?
Yes.
The son that I'm speaking of that I lost is not my son who was bullied.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. I think losing anyone that is close to you can take a huge toll on you. And no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you've gotten back up and you're leaving a beautiful mark in the world. So I would love if you could share, before we go to the final segment of the show, where people can watch the film, where they can learn more from you and about you.
Thank you for asking. So the film was released in April and then had a second release last month. And in the US, you can screen it on Prime Video and Fandor, Hoopla, Tubi, etc. And then in Canada, you can find it on Apple TV, iTunes, Google Play, and so on. But if they want to know more about those platforms or more about the documentary and so on and so forth, they can go to my website. May I say it's brokenvowsfilm.com. And also they can follow me on Instagram at Sunnie, SUNNIE BIZ 13, SunnieBiz 13. And also Broken Vows documentary on IG as well. So I have 2 IGs. And, I'm happy for people to reach out to me if they want to share or have questions. I'm happy for them to do that.
Awesome. So to make sure they can do that, I will have all of the links where they can connect with you and watch the documentary in the detailed section of the episode so they don't have to search too far.
Fabulous.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So for this final segment of the show, it's kind of like a rapid fire. I call it a walk in her wisdom. And I just ask a couple of reflection questions. You share the first thing that comes to mind, whether that be one word or one sentence. And I don't like rules. Sometimes I may ask you to unpack. All right. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why?
First thing that comes to mind, you can walk through the darkness to the light. And did you say where?
Yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Times Square.
Love it. Love it. Name one of the most worthwhile investments that you've ever made. And that could be of money, time, energy.
Of course, my babies, my children.
Love it.
Because they're going to go on and continue doing wonderful things.
Absolutely.
I know that for a fact.
I love it. Okay, so how has motherhood changed you?
Oh, as I mentioned to you before, I've always wanted to be a mother. So it's only enriched my life. It hasn't changed me. It's enriched my life. It's made me very, very happy, a very proud woman, but it's enriched my life.
What's been the biggest surprise that you've had in the last year?
First thing that comes to mind, distribution for the doc. Every independent filmmaker dreams and hopes and strives for that, but unfortunately, it doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I reached out at the precise moment to a woman who heard me and saw the need for this and made my dream come true, that knowing will help so many others. That's the biggest surprise.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. When and where are you the happiest?
Ooh, I'm going to say with my children.
Love it. Okay. Last but not least, what do you wish women would do more of?
Believe in themselves, believe in what they can do, and not lose sight of that,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how big or how small it is.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Thank you, Sunnie, for not only sharing your story with us, but for sharing your gems. I'm holding my chest because I feel very emotional right now. Just thank you for who you are, for being resilient and for being an advocate and for being so loving and caring that you want to, spread that awareness around the world. Just thank you for who you are.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to do so, to share my story.
Thank you so much. And to all of you legacy leavers out there, until next time, subscribe on all platforms. Don't forget to rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcast. And I just want to thank each and every one of you who continues to listen all over the world and has made the show globally rank in the top 1.5%. And that's out of over 2.8 million podcasts. That's a lot. So feel free to join the community of legacy leavers. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter at awalkinmystilettos.com, where you'll get a free copy of my gratitude journal. And you can also purchase any one of my personal development books available online everywhere. And I'm going to challenge you today. If you can think of 5 women that would receive value from hearing Sunnie's story, that would receive value from her gems on separation, please share it with them. Feel free to screenshot this week's episode and let us know what resonated with you. You can tag Sunnie at SunnieBiz13. That's SUNNIEBIZ 13. Or you can tag the Broken Vows documentary page. And you can tag myself at The Real McKinney Smith and continue to walk in greatness in your stilettos in a manner worthy of your calling.